It all started on the last full moon of fall, when four close friends, Mina, Tyler, Layla, and Ramon, gathered in Mina's basement for what was supposed to be a harmless night of spooky fun. They planned to watch old horror movies, eat stale candy corn from a previous Halloween, and try out ridiculous internet rituals that were rumored to be going around school. One of these rituals was to challenge the Queen of Spades, a creepy game that was whispered about in the hallways and written about in the back pages of library books. They laughed at it as some kind of chainmail nonsense, but on that cold, dark night, the challenge was a challenge. The basement itself was already eerie, dilapidated walls with exposed beams and cobwebs, a single dim light bulb swinging overhead, and shelves lined with dusty boxes. There was a faint smell of damp concrete and old newspapers. This musty air, combined with the flickering light of a single candle, intensified every shadow on the basement walls. "Let's do this," Tyler said with a mischievous grin. He pushed aside a pile of discarded board game boxes, making room on the concrete floor for a makeshift altar, just a towel they spread out to keep their feet from getting numb from the cold. In the center, they placed an old deck of cards. With far more bravado than either of them felt, they agreed to come face to face with the rumored Queen of Spades. Layla pulled a piece of chalk out of her jacket pocket and carefully drew the outline of the spade on the floor around the deck of cards. Ramon set his phone to record, the bright screen emphasizing his nervous expression. Mina cleared her throat and read aloud a short paragraph she had found on an unknown website that described how to summon the Queen. Tap the deck once, say her name 3 times, and place the Queen of Spades face down in the center. They followed the instructions precisely, with pounding hearts, half smiling at the ridiculousness of it all. But behind their forced smiles was an uneasy feeling. The moment Mina said, "Queen of Spades, we summon you," the candle flame trembled, as if an invisible breath had passed through the air. For a split second, it seemed as if the entire basement was tilting. And then, nothing. They waited, exchanging nervous laughter. Tyler joked that the great and terrible ritual had failed them. They decided to go back upstairs, maybe watch some cheap vampire movie. The tension dissolved into relief. But as they walked up the stairs, each of them felt an unsettling presence behind them, as if someone or something was watching their every move. It was a strange heaviness in the air, a thorn in the back of their heads. They tried to shake off the feeling, joking that they were going to eat pizza and drink soda. However, the basement door creaked louder than usual, and when it finally closed, they swore they heard a faint, hoarse echo of laughter from downstairs. Despite their bravado, fear awoke in their hearts that night as they realized too late that they may have unleashed something that no one in this small town had dared to disturb for decades. The night passed uneasily. Despite the initial jokes, a dark veil of fear seemed to cover them, and they could not shake it. Around midnight, after they had eaten rolls of pizza and tried to lighten the mood with jokes, Mina left her bedroom to get a glass of water. As she passed the stairs leading to the basement, she froze. The hoarse laughter she had heard earlier returned, emerging from the darkness. She stood there, pulse racing, listening to something that almost sounded like the shuffling of cards. The sound was distant, but distinct. She tried to figure out where it was coming from. Maybe it was old pipes rattling. Maybe she was half asleep and imagining it. Forcing herself to laugh, she hurried to the kitchen, grabbed some water, and ran back to bed without looking back. Across town, Tyler, Layla, and Ramon couldn't sleep either. Around 2 a.m., Layla woke up abruptly with the feeling that something was hovering over her. She sat up, groping for the lamp, convinced that she had heard her name whispered. In the light of the bedside lamp, her room was empty. It should have calmed her, but every shadow seemed too tall, too elongated, forming shapes against the wallpaper that didn't quite match the furniture. She tried to laugh, but tears pricked the corners of her eyes. Ramon was even worse off. He was lying half-conscious, sweating, and suffering from an inexplicable chill. In his half-dream, he saw the woman's face hidden under a black lace veil, the edges of her lips curled in a cold smile. When he woke up, that smile was still burning in his mind. He turned on every light in his bedroom, his heart pounding like a drum. He swore he could hear the echo of that hoarse laugh, as if someone was standing right outside his window. Tyler, ever the skeptic, shrugged off his strange experience. He woke up to the smell of cigarette smoke and stale perfume, a disgusting combination. Convinced that someone was outside, perhaps a neighbor or passerby, he checked every window and door. No one was there, and after 10 minutes of searching, the smell disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared. In the morning, the friends tried to hide their sleep-deprived faces and frayed nerves. They messaged each other in group messages, dancing around their fears, each claiming that they were just weird dreams or tossing and turning all night. No one dared to speak openly about the callings. Perhaps it was just a coincidence. But that evening, when they gathered at Mina's house, deciding to laugh about the lingering restlessness, they found something waiting for them at the top of the basement stairs. The deck of cards they had left downstairs, unfolded in a perfect spiral, with the Queen of Spades in the center, face up, as if inviting them back into the darkness. Mina stood at the top of the basement stairs, her breath catching in her throat. The deck of cards laid out in front of her looked incredibly neat, each card placed with deliberate precision, creating a spiral pattern that ended in the Queen of Spades. The sight gave her goosebumps. Ramon was the first to speak, his voice tense. "We left those cards downstairs, didn't we?" Tyler swallowed hard, trying to sound braver than he felt. "It's just someone messing with us." "Probably. But no one else had access to the house, not with the door locked all night." Layla sat down, staring intently at the Queen of Spades in the center. A chill ran through her. The eyes on the Queen's face seemed remarkably detailed, as if they had been drawn by a hand far more skilled than any factory printer. She ran her fingertips over the card, and immediately felt a spark of static pierce her skin. She yelped, stumbling backward. Mina pushed the others aside and grabbed the entire deck in her trembling fist. She walked down the hall to the kitchen, pulled open the drawer under the sink, and threw the cards inside. "It's over," she finally said, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. She slammed the drawer shut and put the lock back on it, the old lock her parents had put on the drawer to protect it from the kids years ago. The tension in the room eased a bit, as if they had the situation under control. But in the hours that followed, it seemed like an unsettling presence was lurking around every corner. The doors creaked as if they were being pushed by invisible hands. The air took on a musty, cold odor, similar to the smell of old tobacco and damp earth. Sometimes they would notice something dark moving in their peripheral vision, but when they turned around, they saw nothing but dusty furniture and flickering light. The longer they stayed in the house, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Someone suggested that everyone go outside, as if fresh air could break the spell. Huddled on the porch, they took turns trying to find a rational explanation. They blamed their overactive imaginations, stress, anything but the possibility that the spell had worked. Yet no amount of logic could dispel the electric terror that hummed through their veins. When they finally gathered the courage to go back inside, they saw that the TV in the living room was on full volume, emitting static. The remote control was on the coffee table. Layla pressed the power button, and the screen went dark. They stood in a silent daze. A minute passed, then two. Suddenly, an old wooden radio on a nearby shelf came to life with a bang, and the dials spun by themselves. A melody seeped out of the speaker, slow and dissonant, like a distorted waltz from another time. The lights overhead flickered to the eerie tune. Tyler jerked to turn off the radio, but nothing happened. The dial was stuck in place, as if held by an invisible hand. Then Mina noticed the basement door. It was opening slowly, centimeter by centimeter. A single weak light bulb in the corridor provided enough light to see something written on the inside of the door. 3 letters scrawled in deep black lines. "Here." Their growing fear pushed them closer, though their hearts were pounding in a warning. Something told them that if they dared to go down again, the Queen of Spades would be waiting for them in the shadows. They had to leave. Every instinct screamed at them to run out of the house and never look back. But the eerie tune on the radio, the musty smell of stale smoke, and the half-open basement door seemed like a direct challenge. Despite their clammy hands and rumbling stomachs, they crawled toward the stairs, following the insistent pull of fear that called them down. Mina walked ahead, the flashlight trembling in her hand. As soon as they stepped onto the cold concrete floor, their breath caught in the sudden chill. Shadows clung to every corner, and the single light bulb above their heads flickered faintly. Layla almost tripped over a box, barking under her breath. The entire basement seemed alive, pulsating with an invisible heartbeat that matched the pounding in their ears. Halfway across the room, the flashlight's beam fell on a locked kitchen drawer that had somehow been dragged down to the basement. It was on its side, though it split where someone had tried to open it. There were cards on the floor, each neatly arranged face up, forming a curved path leading deep into the darkness. At the end of this row of cards, the Queen of Spades was waiting again, mocking them with her amazingly lively eyes. Suddenly, the door behind them slammed shut, plunging the room into almost complete darkness, save for the fluttering beam of Mina's flashlight. Tyler rushed back to open the door again, but it wouldn't budge, as if an invisible force was holding it shut. A faint shuffling sound reached their ears, a deliberate, disturbing rustling that seemed to come from all directions at once. And then they heard laughter, her laughter. The same hoarse laugh that had haunted Mina's dreams now echoed off the bare walls. It was closer, somehow circling around them in the cramped space. One by one, the lamps overhead dimmed to a sickly orange glow until they went out, leaving only the narrow beam of a flashlight. Ramon gasped when he saw a flicker of movement, a pale hand darting behind a stack of boxes. Fear gripped him, strong and primal. If they didn't act now, something terrible would happen in this sticky darkness. With pounding hearts, they forced themselves to follow the trail of maps, inch by inch, terrified inch by inch. With each step, the temperature dropped lower and lower, and the hoarse laughter grew sharper. The walls seemed to be closing in on them, the basement shrinking around their shivering bodies. When they finally reached the Queen of Spades at the end of the stitch, Mina dropped to her knees, chattering her teeth. She picked up the card from the floor, intending to tear it in half, to destroy it once and for all. But the moment her fingers closed around the card, an arrow of burning cold shot into her arm, nearly knocking her down. An impossible weight pressed down on them from above, as if something massive and malevolent had interfered with their reality. The flashlight flickered wildly, illuminating a moving silhouette in the corner, a tall figure shrouded in darkness with two glittering, merciless eyes. It was the last straw. The friends ran for their lives, hearts pounding, feelings screaming. But how could they escape, locked in a sealed basement with the creature they had summoned? As the silhouette drew closer, an oppressive force washed over them like a tidal wave of fear. Mina closed her eyes, clutching the Queen of Spades card in her fist. In that moment, she knew something was about to break. Her nerves, their luck, or the barrier between their world and the nightmare they had awakened. Trapped in the darkness, the friends felt the cold grow until their lungs ached with every breath. The flashlight flickered on and off, illuminating momentary flashes of a tall, cloaked figure that crept closer and closer. A razor-thin tension hung in the basement air, ringing with anger. Mina clutched the Queen of Spades card with a trembling hand, desperately searching for a solution. It had all started with an online ritual. Maybe there was a way to turn it all around. Ramon, she hissed, her voice cutting through the static in her ears. Did the website say anything about how to break the spell? Ramon involuntarily returned to the dusty corners of the forum where he had first read about the Queen of Spades. It mentioned something about releasing her, some kind of exorcism ritual, but it was vague. There was another laugh, low and mocking, and the figure in the corner moved, as if leaning forward. Layla and Tyler clung to each other, their hearts pounding, while Mina and Ramon tried to recall every detail of the call instructions. Suddenly, the overhead light flashed for a second, just long enough to reveal a figure wrapped in a torn black veil in the corner. Beneath it, hungry eyes gleamed, promising suffering. The lights went out again, plunging them into darkness. Mina's voice trembled as she spoke, "Knock once on the deck." Ramon continued, stringing the lines together between shaky breaths, "Say her name 3 times." Layla's eyes lit up with realization. What if we do the opposite? Put it back in the deck, tap it 3 times, and deny her name. Tyler put his hand on Mina's arm. "It's worth a try." They moved as one, each doing their part. Layla groped for the scattered cards, gathering them in frantic handfuls. Tyler pulled a small metal skillet from a dusty shelf, determined to destroy the cards if the exorcism failed. Ramon found the broken drawer again, rummaging through it until he came across the battered remains of a deck. But the figure did not allow them to continue without a fight. The shadows crawled across the basement floor like living tendrils, wrapping themselves around their ankles. A strangled groan escaped Tyler's lips as something cold touched his leg, like a bony hand squeezing him from the darkness. Mina forced herself to focus. She slammed the Queen of Spades into the deck, holding it so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "We have to finish," she shouted, her voice trembling. "Now." Ramon read what he could remember. "By the power that called you, we break the bond. We banish you, Queen of Spades. Leave us." They tapped the deck 3 times, hard and purposefully. Instead of chanting the Queen's name, each of them spat out the only disclaimer they could think of. "We renounce you, Queen of Spades. We renounce you. We renounce you." The temperature in the basement dropped sharply, and every breath came out in white clouds. For a terrifying moment, the silhouette of a creature rose above them, the edges of its robe fluttering in the invisible wind. Then the flashlight flickered wildly, and a piercing scream cut through the silence. The light bulb overhead flashed, flooding the basement with light. In that flash of brightness, they saw the queen's figure dissolve into a black fog, its edges jagged and thin. A last hoarse laugh sounded through the windows, and then she was gone. Tyler didn't waste any time. He picked up a metal pot, threw the deck inside, and although his hands were shaking, struck a match from a nearby shelf. The cards caught fire with a sudden thud. Together, they watched the flames consume the deck, thick smoke rising. The oppressive weight in the air lifted, and the basement door creaked open on its own. The acrid smell of burning paper burned their lungs, but neither of them moved until the flames turned the cards to ash. Finally, they left the basement and entered the living room with a shuddering relief. The radio was silent. The house was quiet. The suffocating presence had disappeared. For a long time, none of them spoke. They just exchanged glances full of disbelief and exhaustion. Each of the friends knew that their lives would never be the same again. They had peeked behind the curtain and were confronted with something truly sinister. In the days that followed, the house returned to its normal life. The smell of cigarette smoke disappeared, the strange noises stopped, and they were no longer haunted by laughter at night. They told themselves that it was over, that they had sent the Queen of Spades back to the dark realm from whence she came. But sometimes, late at night, Mina could swear that she could smell a faint trace of that cold, stale perfume wafting through the air. And when she closed her eyes, she could imagine the Queen's face in dancing shadows, lurking just out of sight, waiting for someone foolish enough to call her name again.